So
Okay.
welcome everybody to the latest version of the AskTOM Office Hours for JSON in the database. And today, Beta, who knows everything, is going to cover how to use JSON transform. And he's going to be running this in an Oracle 20C preview release database that's up in the cloud on a virtual machine cloud. Is it a compute instance or just a virtual bare metal?
It's a VM. It's a VM. I'll talk about it. Yeah.
Beta will show you how all that stuff works because, like I said, he knows everything. And I will be here for support. I'll be watching for questions. If you have a question, you'll see somewhere on your screen there. It's probably down here somewhere. There's a button that says Q&A. Just click on that, type your question in there, and I will interrupt Beta every now and then with the questions. If you need to send us a chat, there's a chat button next to that. But that should cover all of the controls. So I will turn this over to Beta, who always does an awesome job. Go ahead, Beta.
Thanks, Blaine. You always keep saying I know everything, which couldn't be further from the truth. But on this one, I may know a bit because I was the monkey that coded this. So let's talk about the JSON transform update feature. I have to put up the safe harbor slide because this feature is in the 20C preview, so it's not available on premise yet, and it may also change in future versions. So don't take it for granted that it comes exactly like this. And since this is a new feature, and I spoke about JSON Type, which was also a 20C feature, I figured people who want to try this out firsthand, they need some instructions where they could do this. It's not downloadable and it's not on LifeSQL or anything else. So I wrote a little blog entry on how to do this. So if you look on the JSON-DB blog, I'm also maintaining this. I'm not very active. I should probably write more blogs here. But the latest post is how to get this 20C preview release. So I tried it out myself, and I took some screenshots while doing this. So you need a cloud account for this, so you need to sign up. That doesn't mean you have to pay money. I think this is totally free, and you get some cloud credits. And later, after your cloud credits expire, you will get to the always free option. So this is definitely an option to get some familiarity with the Oracle Cloud without having to have a paid account. So I don't think I want you to now to walk you through this, but it's basically a set of steps with screenshots where you first have to create your own virtual cloud network, and then you set a rule that you allow the port for the database. I think it's 15. I believe if you actually download these images, they have the original resolution, so then they're easier to see the details. But there's this database port that you open, and then
Could be 1521.
It's 1521, right?
Yeah.
So I'm using this port. So yeah, if you don't see this, just download this image. I believe then it's getting in the original resolution, and you can read this text. It's not magnifying it if you click on it. And then I show you how to create this database. There are some important steps, so you have to do it you have to follow exactly these steps to create it as a virtual machine and use Logical Volume Manager. Otherwise, you won't see the 20C option. Then it will only give you 12.2 or 19 as an option. Exactly. So you follow this, you generate your own key. I also gave some pointers how you can generate a pair of public keys and private keys. And at the end, you will have a database. And from that database, you need to extract your connect string, and then you can use this to create a connection to SQL Developer. So I think this should be a step-by-step instruction. This is how I did it. And I'm actually using my cloud instance for today's demo. So hopefully everything goes fine. Let's jump back to the slides. So yeah, and if you have any questions, if you feel that there are some mistakes or some inconsistencies or something is missing in the doc, please contact me. And then I can correct it. Good. So this is only a preview mode for a limited time. I don't know what limited time means, whether they take it down tomorrow or in a month, I don't know. But they're not used for production. So this is really for you to try it out and maybe give us some feedback, what you like or what you think is missing, and then we may be able to incorporate it. The documentation is also out there. So today I will talk about JSON transform. I showed you how to get it as a cloud version, but on the documentation, if you prefer reading the new features in the documentation, that's also out. There is the SQL language reference, which gives you the syntax diagrams, and there is also the JSON developer guide, which has its own section on JSON transform. And in the last AskTOM session, I told you about this JSON type, which uses this OSINT format, and how it's not only optimized for query, but also for piecewise updates. So I told you if you make an update, you don't have to rewrite the entire JSON, but we put new values at the end, and then we tombstone some old values. So this minimizes the number of bytes you need to update. And this is how we get very good update performance. But today we want to focus on how to actually express such an update. And for this, we've added a new operator. It's called JSON transform. And the reason it's called JSON transform and not JSON update is because you can use JSON transform also outside of the update clause. For example, inside it is select. I will have an example for this too. And this uses a lot of concepts that we exposed in the other SQL JSON operators. So this is right now in the standardization process. So we want to definitely make this part of the SQL standard. And this is why it looks, or it reuses a lot of concepts from the other operators. So the path expressions have the same syntax. You can express these predicates like you could do in JSON exists. You have these trailing functions. So it basically looks and feels quite similar. So if you know how to write a JSON value or a JSON table, then I believe this is quite natural. And the idea is that you can have a number of modifying operations, and the modifying operations could be a set or a remove or an append, followed by a path expression which selects the one node or the multiple nodes you want to apply your transformation on. And then there is a right-hand side value, which is, for example, here it's a string literal. So in this example here, maybe I should have said that first, we have a person, John Smith, who is doing a career change. So he's a programmer making a decent salary, but now he wants to stop his, and he wants to become a surfing instructor. So we change the job title from programmer to surfing instructor, and this is a string literal. The salary is then divided by 3, and we're erasing all the phone numbers where the type is work. So this is a path expression which has this predicate. So we first select the array phones, then we iterate over this array using square bracket star. I could also say 0 or 1 if I wanted to go to a specific position, but star means it's kind of a for each loop for every value in the array. And then we have the filter at.type equals work. And that is that node, that the nodes that are selected are getting removed. And we can append to an array, and we can calculate a value. So after we apply this, the result would like this. All the green stuff is has been modified. And since I prefer doing these things in real code over slides, let's now try if my database is still running, my cloud database. So this is, yes, it's still up. So I'm not using a Docker image right now, which I've done in the past sessions or live SQL. Now I'm using this real cloud database. So you could do the exact same if you follow this step to get it. So let's create a table here, has the great name T. And I have a column called call, and it's of JSON type. And just an example that JSON type does validation, so I don't need to do an extra check constraint like we would have to do if this was a varchar or a CLOB. So I'm inserting a value here, I'm not JSON, and I get an expected error message back saying that this value is not JSON. So let's insert a real record. This is our John Smith. It's the same document or the same data that I've just shown on the slide. And this is a bit of repetition of the last session. So you may be familiar with this if you attended the JSON type session, that as of today, you can't print the JSON type in this version of SQL Developer because it's a new data type, and we need a SQL Developer version which understands how to present or how to print this JSON type. So what we do instead, we put this JSON serialize operator on top, which takes the JSON and converts it to a string. And it also has, you can also use JSON serialize on club values or text values. For example, if you want to do some pretty printing, then I believe you just put a pretty there, and you would see pretty printing in SQL in SQL Plus. But here all you see is that indentation has been added. Unfortunately, the new lines are not printed correctly. But I guess if you copy this out into a editor, you will see the new lines, and it's all nicely printed. Then, obviously, this is a programmer. Everyone is interested in salary. Let's select it. And we get the same error message here. And the reason is that this extracts a value from the JSON and returns it as a JSON type itself. So you can't, it's the same issue, you can't print it here. Let's find out what the type is. And it would tell us, well, the salary is a number, and now we can convert it to something that SQL Developer understands by putting this trailing number function on it. And I'm showing this here because we're gonna use this later in our update statement. So these trailing functions are a way to convert a JSON value or a scalar JSON value to the corresponding SQL type. So now let's do a simple update. And you've seen in my table here, I have created two columns. One is the JSON, and then there is an ID column, which is a number. That's a relational column. And let's say I wanted to put this ID into this JSON object itself. So what I could do in this update, I could say, update my, my table, the column, with JSON transform and set the ID. So this is a simple set operation here. Set that to this SQL expression, and this SQL expression is the ID column of the same table. So if we run this update and we print it, so I'm selecting here the ID, that's the relation column, then I'm serializing the JSON. You see that the ID is 123. And if we scroll through our JSON, we should be seeing that there is an ID column or an ID field value as well here, and its value is being taken from the column value. So it's also 123. Good, so now let's run this example here that I've just put on the slide. So now I'm updating my table with multiple operations. So I'm not limited to only have one set. I mean, I think for a lot of operations, you will only have one set or one remove, but JSON Transform supports a list of these operations, and they are actually executed in the exact same order as you write them here. So each operation is executed, and the next operation sees the values that were, or the modification that has taken place. So for example, you could create an object in the first step, and then in the second step, you insert something into this object or into the array. So let's run this statement here. So this is where we change the job. We remove the work phone number. We do the calculation here of the salary. And here you see we are selecting the salary from our JSON. So this is all a SQL expression. This right-hand side is being calculated by extracting the salary value, which is still a JSON type. We convert it to a number in order to divide it by 3. And we have this append operation, which adds a value to an array. So let's commit this, and we print it. And now again, we can scan through this object to see the update. So the job is now a surfing instructor, the salary got modified, and in our array of phone numbers, the work phone number is gone. We only have the mobile phone number. And our array has now 3 items, a third child has been added. So inside this JSON object, the order is not guaranteed. So this is whenever you do a modifying operation, for example, what did we do here? We set a salary value to a new value. This doesn't mean that the salary is guaranteed to occur at the same order, meaning after the job and before the phone. So the ordering here, by definition, could be different in a JSON object. Good. So now we're doing another update here just to show how you can use this trailing function size. So now we decide, well, our array has 3 members, but what if we wanted to have actually a field that told us how big this array was? So I'm using now the insert operation, which assumes that there is no value called numKids. So if we run this here, we should be seeing that number of kids, well, it got added at the end. This is 3. It got calculated by this array size. But now if we execute this again, then insert assumes that no key numKids exists. So if I had written set, it would overwrite the value. With insert, I can write a code under the assumption that it doesn't exist. So now what could I do if this exists? I mean, here I'm seeing this error. I can't do the update because this value exists. I can override this default. So one thing would be, for example, to say ignore on existing. So someone who looked into JSON value or JSON query, this may ring a bell because we have this null on error, null on empty things, and similar things exists here. So there is a default. One may not need to override it, just pointing out that the possibility exists. I could, for example, say I want to insert a value, numKids 55, but if it exists, I want it not to raise an error. I also don't want it to overwrite it. I want just to ignore it. So this is what ignore on existing does. And if I print this, I will see that numKids is still 3. Good. The other option here, besides ignoring and raising an error, would be a replace on existing. So I could say, if it's there, then just replace it. And then it kind of becomes synonym with set. So set is a combination of insert. There is a similar one which is called replace. I don't have an example for replace here, but there's also the replace command, which would raise an error if a value wasn't existing. So this is to give developers some more semantic control. Set is always working, but set kind of does an upsert. And in some cases, people may want to say, well, I really assume here that this value is not there, and if it is there, something is wrong with my data, so I want to get an error on this insert.
We've got a couple questions.
Yeah.
All right, first question. When you get the value of a field salary, or when you get the value of field salary, it is a JSON type value, which you had to convert to a number, at least for SQL Developer. But when you set the salary, you set it to a SQL number. Does it automatically get converted to JSON type? If not, it looks like get and set are not symmetric.
If I would, for example, have, I mean, this becomes a SQL number, and we're setting the value inside here to a numeric value. So we have this extended type system in JSON type, where a node, if it's a scalar node, can be a string or a number. And even if it's a number, it could be an oracle number, or it could be a double or a float. So we are preserving the typeness of the value inside the JSON. So if someone asked me, is this becoming a JSON value, then strictly I would have to say no, because a scalar JSON value as defined by the RFC could be a Boolean or a number or a string or null, but for example, not a date or a timestamp. There is no JSON direct support for a date or a timestamp. And even for a number, JSON RFC doesn't really tell what a number is. It just says this is a number, but it's not saying, is this like an integer, is this a float, is this a double, whatever. So whenever we see an assignment like this, this is a SQL type. In this case, it's an Oracle number that is being preserved inside this JSON type. Meaning if you later do an extraction, say you do an insert select into a double column or a timestamp column, you get absolutely no conversion loss. Or similarly, if you would ship such instance to a JDBC client, that would also see this is a float or this is a timestamp. So this is the extended type system. I think I spoke a bit about this in the last AskTOM session when I spoke about JSON type. I hope that answers the question. Was there another one?
Yes, there's another question here. It's, what does .size return if the specified array does not exist? 0 or null or?
I guess it returns null. We can try it out later. I guess it returns null, yes, but we can try it out. But maybe after it, kind of to keep people online because they're curious what it does. I don't know. We're going to try it out. Okay. Anything else so far?
Nope, that's it so far.
Okay, so I just executed, I think we were here, I executed the statement here where it said this John Smith now has 55 children, and I used this insert to replace on existing, and we see it went through, it didn't ignore it, it didn't raise an error, but obviously this is pretty stupid data, someone having 55 children, so let's just roll it back so you can see all this machinery. The nice relational machinery also works with JSON type. Probably not very surprising for someone familiar with the Oracle database, but if you talk to some NoSQL database guys, they just love this. Okay, so let's remove this number kids thing. So this is an example for this remove operation. We may decide this could lead to inconsistencies as we've seen here with this 55. Why have this value? Let's just remove it. So this is an example for the remove operation. And I think we see right hand side it's gone. Now if I do another remove, so there is no numKids in my JSON, but I'm removing it again. It's basically a no op. So no errors being raised because the default is to ignore this case. But I could even specify that I want this to raise an error. I am assuming it exists. In my use case, I assume this value exists. I want to remove it. And if it's not there, then something was wrong and I want to investigate it. So also here we have these error clauses here. It's not on existing, but on missing. So I could say remove number of kids, but error on missing means raise me an error if it's not there. So this also works. Good. Now we're getting to another use case where we want to use JSON transform, not to update the data on disk, but we want to use it to massage the data a little bit before it ships from the database to the client. So here we see that the JSON transform is used directly in the select. Again, I put the JSON serialize on top because we want to print it. And let's say I want to have some UI where I want to show this person information, but I want to remove everything that's truly private. So I want to remove, or I want to mask the salary. I don't remove the salary, I'm just replacing it with x-axis. I'm removing the information about the children and the age, and I'm also removing every phone number that's not a work phone number. So I'm running this thing here, and we see that the phones is now empty. This person had no phone number, or had no work phone number, only a mobile number. This got removed. The salary is still there, but it's kind of masked, and all the other information about children and age is gone. So this operation didn't do anything to the data on disk, but it just modified it before it went out. There is the inverse of the remove. If I don't want to specify every path to be removed, I could also say, I only want these things to be preserved. So this could be an example if you have, it's actually quite common in JSON that you have schema, because it's schema flexible, that you may have a lot of optional fields. So if you say, well, I'm really interested in these fields, let's remove all the others. You may have the problem that you don't know what all the other fields are because they could be arbitrarily added, or you may look at one record and that has 10 fields, but another one may have 20 or so. So this is why we added this keep operation. And here you add a list of path expression which you want to be preserved. So here we say I want the ID, the first name, the last name, and the phone number where the type is a mobile phone number. So this is just to show another example that we have these predicate support in JSON transform. And now you see that all the rest got removed. Then another example here where we bring this num_kids value back, this number of kids value back into the thing here, is that you could say, well, I really want the number of kids to be a separate value, but I don't want to store it on disk because then it could be inconsistent. Someone could be updating just the num_kids field without updating the array, or vice versa. So num_kids could be 10 and the array could be empty. So instead, what I'm doing, if my application needs this num_kids, I'm just calculating it on the fly before shipping it. So here we're setting number of kids to this calculated value, so then it will always be correct. And I keep these three values. So let's run it. And you see that John Smith has 3 kids. So the value is back, but it's not on disk. One thing to I'm making a little modification here. I'm just copying it that we can see the old value now. And what I'm doing here, I am setting number of kids to this value, but then in this keep operation, I remove number of kids. So now what's happening is, well, we actually calculated this value, updated the transient JSON type, but then we said, hey, I only want those values to be preserved. So the value we just calculated for num_kids is gone. So this is to show that each of these operations is executed one by the other. And that's the same in each of these. So for most of these examples, the order doesn't really matter, but there are examples where it actually matters, where you first create an object and then you add something to the object, for example.
Question on that?
Yes.
Must the set, remove, and insert be specified for each element, or is the keyword valid for all following elements until a new keyword is specified, as in keep?
That's an excellent question. For keep, it already works. And the reason it has to work that way is if you can actually only have one keep operation, because keep removes all the rest. So you better put it in one keep. If I would say, if I would write it like this, keep first name, then basically after it executed this line, the last name would be removed. So there would be nothing to be preserved in the next keep. This is why the keep can only be one keep per operation, and you can enumerate all the path expression here. But I think the question is more towards, and please confirm this, that if I want to remove multiple things, instead of repeating remove, could I write it like this here, where I say remove, and then I list a bunch of path expressions, and then I could have a set here. Is this, can we confirm this quickly on the chat that this is what the person meant?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not implemented that. I thought about it a couple times, but I haven't had the time to do it. But I believe since this question was asked now, it has a bit more urgency. So how much do you want it? Like put a few stars there. 1 star, you mean like a little bit, or 5 stars meaning like, yeah, really important.
How about enter it in the Q&A, and I believe there's a voting function. Everybody can click on the voting function.
It shouldn't be too hard. This is like the parsing thing. Maybe I could code this in 2 hours.
All right, so it just popped up with the stars and the voting thing. Just click that thumb up if you see it there. And
see, this is why I like this preview thing. We can show it, and then people can say, I want more, less, better. Oh, I think it was like that, yeah.
Well,
Good.
so
Any
far
more
we've got
questions?
3 votes. We'll just leave that running. If you decide you want to
Yeah,
vote for it
yeah,
later, we'll
yeah,
just leave that up.
yeah. So, I mean, this is JSON transform. Any more questions? We could try it out live here. I mean, this is what I've prepared. It's a bit shorter. And we had one more question regarding what happens with, what's the value of size if there is no array, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so let's see. Let's hope we don't crash this. I mean, maybe we get an RS600. So what I'm doing here is I put in an empty object as input, and then I say set dollar dot, what was it called? Kidnum? How did I call this? Numkids. Numkids equals, well, and let's just copy it from here. That's easier because then I can pull out the value. Because then I just have to do it like this, right? This value doesn't exist. And numkids, it's null, so it's a null value. Yeah. So it's becoming a JSON null here. And the reason is that this is a null value, so we could basically null this becomes null here. This is the SQL null value. And now we're basically saying to transform, set this value to SQL null. That's the reason why it's null. Yeah. So if you have any suggestions, if you missed something here, I mean, we could also see how we could create an object here. How would I do that? Didn't prepare that. Let's say I have, actually this might work here. Let's just do from dual here. So we're saying I'm having an empty object. And by the way, JSON transform also works on text. So it works on JSON type, but in this example here, I'm putting in an empty object as a text. So this, I believe, should work. And now let's say, ABC, missing right printers. I hate these things. Serialize open. I guess it's this one here. Yeah. Okay, so it works on text. But now what we want to do is we want to create like a nested object. Let's call it A. And I could use the JSON constructor here. I could, for example, say JSON, and I could construct it from a string itself. Oh, let's create an array. This is nicer. So I have an object, and let's say there is something already inside. There is a x is 1, and I want to add a new array. So what I'm doing here is I'm constructing a JSON array value by using the JSON type constructor. The other thing I could also do is to use the shortcut generation functions. I believe it's like this, where I could just say create me an object. That's even shorter, and even that gets. So now I got my array, and now in the next operation, I have to be sure where to put it. It's basically here. Now I could do an append $.a equals my first item. Yeah, so this is how you would create a complex value and stash something inside. So what we're not doing, I thought about this, and I leave this for you to comment whether you think it's good or not, is what I'm not doing is, if I have my object here, which has an X, and the next operation says append $.a first item, I am not auto-creating this array. So one could think of, or maybe do I do this? Create on missing. Maybe I did this. It would be called create on missing. It's been a while since I've done this. Ah, I actually do it. Okay, cool. So this is also working. Okay, I did it. So yeah, so you don't even have to create your array first. You can just say, well, if you do an array operation, but I think I don't do this for objects. So if we say this would be an insert. No, insert works because, yeah, it would be dot A dot B, for example. So let's say I am inserting a value. So if I just write this here, this would just add, not sure if create on missing is even supported here. My first item, yeah, this would just create this thing. But let's say I further drill down into it. So let's say I am assuming that this is a person record and there is a object and a zip, and I want to set this to 1, 2, 3. Then it won't. Actually, this should be disallowed. I think this is a bug. We should raise an error for this syntax because create on missing is not supported on objects. So good, we're doing like live debugging here. But basically, I'm not creating any objects here. I'm not creating a nested object for address. And the reason is that in JSON, the next operation may say address is actually an array of addresses. So now if I created an object, the subsequent operation may actually say, oh, I meant this to be actually a collection of values. Then I would have to convert an object into an array. And that I found very odd. So I decided to not do this auto business on objects that I'm doing on arrays here. So I hope that makes sense. If people believe these objects could be created, then please let me know. But it would also mean if you have like A.B.C.D, then we would create a lot of nested objects. And I'm not sure that's always what people want, especially if like one value in between here was meant to be an array of values. Okay, I went beyond what I had prepared. So shoot me requirements, questions, criticism. Your show now.
All right, any more questions? All right, here's a
Do you
question.
find it intuitive for those? Just a question like, is this, does this look easy enough to be used, or do you think some things are just odd? This just is hard.
There's a question here. Is there a limit size in JSON column? Oracle external table supports big JSON, 2 gigabytes or more.
Yeah, we have, we can, I think JSON type has a limitation. I'm not sure where it is, but for textual, for blob and club, you can go very large, but that doesn't mean you should. And the reason is JSONs that are big are typically big because they have a collection. So for example, you could have like a map as GeoJSON could be very large because it could be one document listing every county in the US, for example. You can actually download these maps. They're big, but you wouldn't want to store them as one large JSON because you couldn't really index it. You basically had just one row. You couldn't parallelize it. There's just one row. How would you parallelize that? You couldn't really index these values because the index stores a row ID and you just have one row ID. So the typical use case is that during an import that you write a JSON table over this large JSON, which then projects out every collection item as a separate column. So in the example, to stay in the example with the maps, you would then create a separate row for every county in the US or for every city in the US. And then instead of one big JSON row, you may have a few hundreds or thousand much smaller JSON rows, which you can then parallelize your queries, you can index, etc. So storing and working with extremely large JSON is generally not a good idea, but you can do it. So you could import it as a club or a blob, then run a JSON table, and that is then also creating the JSON type.
All right, any more last minute questions?
Okay.
All right, looks like we're out of questions. So, oh, enhancement request. Here we go.
Good, like that. Something is coming.
Okay, JSON table with the possibility to access level object values.
With the possibility to access to level object. I don't get it. Can you rephrase the question, Niels? Your name also looks German. You could write in. You could ask in German. I translate it. Okay, these are doctors restricted. Oh, I see. So you want the key names. You want the key names to be projected out as column values, right? So instead of having, okay, yeah, we know this. It's been asked repeatedly, and it's on beta's to-do list. So I need to give them a kick in the butt. That it's not in 20. It's not on this release. You could probably write a table function in PL SQL. It'll do. Doesn't win a beauty contest. How performant it is, I don't know, but it could be a feasible workaround if in some scenarios. But yeah, I know this requirement. I actually have a bug file for this for quite some time, actually.
And we have another question. Can we compare with table columns / join with other tables?
Yes, you can definitely join tables that have JSON, but you wouldn't compare the JSONs directly. And the reason is that the JSON could be a complex value. So how do you compare an object with an array? So you do the same business here. You use these trailing functions. So you, where was it with this number function? So in order to join it, you would first convert it to a SQL type using number or string or what else do we have? Number, string, yeah, timestamp, date, etc. And then you can join all these things. But you would not compare two JSON types directly. What you can do to compare JSON types directly is to use JSON equals, or JSON equal, I think, without the S. And the reason is that if you have these two objects, A is 1, B is 2, this is actually equivalent to just a different order, B2, A1. So JSON equal takes that into consideration. It could even be worse. You could have like an A value quoted here and white spaces here. So on a byte by byte basis, these could be very different. But JSON equal does like a logical comparison. It also allows one, let's say one value to be a varchar and the other to be a club or a JSON type. So this is how you would compare, do an equivalence check. And there's no smaller or greater because in this example, they're equal. Let's say I do is make them not equal. What's a greater or smaller? So you wouldn't do any direct greater, smaller order by comparisons on these JSON types directly. You would always do like extract a value, let's say the A value, and then you say number to turn it into a number, and then you do a normal SQL number comparison. Okay. Any more questions?
I'm not seeing any.
For future AskTOM sessions, what do you want to see? I had one idea about asking a colleague to join, and he would talk a bit about the JDBC changes with JSON type in version 20. Are people interested in that? Is there some people who want to know JDBC implications of JSON type?
While you're thinking about that, there's a question about, are these scripts available on Live SQL?
This script particularly, I mean, LifeSQL is on 19.6 or 19.7, so it doesn't have JSON type. Maybe that person joined late, so I can repeat that I have put out this blog here. Just look about JSON DB blog. If you Google for that, you will find this blog, and the latest entry is how you get this. I could, I didn't add this script here. I could be doing that. Just not sure if the blog is the best form to do that. Or if someone sends me a tweet and an email and I just send this script out. But maybe I could actually put it to this blog. Maybe at the bottom of this, I could edit it and just, yeah, that's a good idea. And maybe add a bit of JSON type as well. Like kind of put some, yeah, actually, let me do this. This is a good idea. So I will go back, edit this blog, made it a bit longer, and kind of add a section here. What if you want to play with JSON type to this, if you want to play with JSON transform to that. Yeah, that sounds good.
We have a suggested topic for on performance and tuning.
Okay.
And then we have, yes, JDBC and JSON is a good idea. Any information for JSON and Python, please?
We do have, I mean, this is more like if this goes in the direction of Soda, we have these Soda drivers. So I could make a demonstration on how to work with the Soda drivers in Python. I'm not an expert though on how to best process JSON data inside the Python language, what parser to use. I'm not really a Python expert at all. I just wrote one program to show how you can use the Python and the Oracle CX drivers to connect to Soda.
I can throw a little bit out there.
Yeah.
I'm also involved in another Office Hours session that we talk about. It's with Chris Jones and Anthony Tuninga.
Yes, exactly, and yes.
We do Node 1 month and Python the following month. The next Python session is going to be June 16th.
Yeah, good.
So that
Did you have a session on the Soda stuff? Was there already something recorded on Soda?
I do enough of these that I remember talking about or hearing about Soda or both. I'm not sure which session it would be or which Office Hours, but I'm sure it's covered somewhere.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not the best person to talk to about Python. I don't really know much about it, especially how people are using it. I used some visualization features that Python had to draw charts and stuff like this based on JSON data from a collection. But
if you come to that Python session, that Office Hours, Anthony's actually the person who wrote the CX Oracle driver. So when it comes to Python, he knows everything.
Absolutely, I second that. Okay, well, thanks a lot for attending, and as always, you can contact me after or before these sessions if you got questions, and I'm very happy I got some good feedback here.
Right. All right, we'll go ahead and call it for the day, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next month. And like Beta said, if you have any extra questions, just drop them on the AskTOM site, and we will try and work them in next time.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
You too. Thanks a lot.